Hey everyone, Matterhorn Matt here with my very first episode of Historyland. Today we'll be talking about the extinct People Mover attraction in Disneyland. Let's get started. At its core, the Disneyland People Mover was the beginning of what Walt envisioned for a brighter, optimistic future filled with all new modes of transportation, including the monorail and the People Mover. In the 1960s, Walt Disney was commissioned to build 4 attractions for the 1964-65 New York World's Fair, which later ended up becoming the beloved attractions It's a Small World, the Carousel of Progress, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, and the Wedway People Mover. Each attraction became an instant hit with guests. At the same time, Walt and his Imagineering team were busy at work on his secret Florida project that included a bigger version of Disneyland and the crown jewel, Epcot, which stood for Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow.
The most exciting, the most important part of our Florida project, in fact, the heart of everything we'll be doing in Disney World, will be our Experimental Prototype City of Tomorrow. We call it Epcot, spelled E-P-C-O-T, Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow.
Epcot would be a living, breathing city with a residential area, marketplace, towering skyscrapers, and shopping centers. All of this would be connected by mass transit systems, the monorail, and the Wedway People Mover. Walt hoped that Epcot would serve as a blueprint for all other American cities to follow, especially his new modes of transportation, and Walt knew exactly where he wanted to test out his new transportation systems.
The wizardry of Lucas. The mastery of Coppola. The phenomenal music and dance of Michael Jackson. Captain EO. In spectacular 3D. Coming September 19th to Disneyland at Walt Disney World and nowhere else in the universe.
Now, in the early 1960s, Tomorrowland was beginning to show its age. What people thought the future would be like in 1955 had slowly changed, and it began to feel less and less futuristic. So in 1967, Disney unveiled New Tomorrowland with all new buildings, color schemes, and attractions. One particular attraction was the Wedway People Mover presented by Goodyear. Now, the People Mover had no actual moving parts, but was propelled by spinning tires, embedded in the track every 9 feet or so. Each car had its own onboard sound system and soundtrack that pointed out attractions along the People Mover's path. To board, guests would walk up a moving ramp to the rotating loading platform. The People Mover vehicles never stopped moving, and the rotating platform moved at the same speed of the People Mover vehicles. Once seated, the doors automatically closed and your tour above the all-new Tomorrowland would begin. The 16-minute journey had you pass through Adventures Through Inner Space, the Progress City model above the Carousel of Progress, above Autopia and the Submarine Lagoon, ride next to the monorail, and finally through the Circle Vision Theater. In later years, it also passed through Star Tours, Tron, and Space Mountain.
And now, here's a sample of the high-speed adventure that awaits you in Space Mountain.
Now, the People Mover had an insane capacity of about 4,000 guests per hour, but unfortunately Walt never got to see the finalized version of New Tomorrowland as he passed away in December of 1966.
When you wish upon a star, magic mirror
Disneyland.
Today we might think of the People Mover as a relaxing ride to hop on when we need a break from the parks. But in the late 80s, Disneyland's new Tomorrowland was beginning to feel dated once again. Not just that, but the state of Tomorrowland was beginning to show its age as well, with the Carousel Theater closed since 1988, and Flight to the Moon changed to Mission to Mars since trips to the moon weren't of the future anymore, and Captain EO's still playing after a decade since its first debut. Now in the 90s, Disneyland was promised a whole new Tomorrowland, Tomorrowland 2055, which would take a big step forward from the Tomorrowland of 1967. But unfortunately, with Disney's newest park, Euro Disneyland, not doing well financially, it was decided that Disneyland would instead get a more cost-friendly version of the future. So in 1998, Disneyland debuted a new steampunk Victorian-style Tomorrowland, which borrowed a lot from Euro Disneyland's Discoveryland. Tomorrowland 1988 opened with new paint jobs and a carbon copy of Euro Disneyland's Orbitron. Gone were the iconic rocket jets that were perched above the central pedestal, replaced with the Observatron, a kinetic sculpture with satellite dishes on its arms that occasionally rotated. And the iconic People Mover replaced by a new thrill ride, the Rocket Rods. Instead of a relaxing, slow-moving vehicle, the Rocket Rods weaved in and out of buildings at speeds up to 35 miles an hour, transforming a 16-minute ride into a measly 3 minutes. The queue for the Rocket Rods started in the old Circle Vision 360 building and winded through an elaborate queue, which at one point goes underneath the Tomorrowland walkway and came up from underground into the old People Mover rotating platform. The Rocket Rods opened to mixed reviews, some ranging from thrilling but not too thrilling, to lacking the thrills of a real thrill ride.
Probably one of the best Disney rides ever.
Yeah,
We loved it.
This was because of the lack of banked turns in the ride track, which forced the ride vehicles to slow down exponentially before making a turn, then speeding back up and slowing down all over again. And in April 2000, the ride closed, promising a huge return the following spring in 2001, but the Rocket Rods never reopened.
Jettison Disneyland 1, Space Mountain Code 2, clear for takeoff.
Instrumentation.
Instrumentation, go.
Propulsion.
Go.
Facility.
Go.
Electrical.
Go. All personnel, clear the launch platform.
Space Mountain. It could only happen at Disneyland.
Experience it now.
One of the biggest reasons for the Rocket Rod's permanent closure was the fact that the aging People Mover tracks weren't built to support the heavy ride vehicles traveling at such high speeds. Some say that the high speeds of the Rocket Rods have damaged the foundations of the track beyond repair. If Disney were to ever bring back the attraction, the entire track would have to be torn down and rebuilt from scratch to fix these problems and to meet the new ADA requirements, which would also involve tearing down each building the track winds through. Many fans of the beloved attraction have clamored for the return of the People Mover, but with the recent construction of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge set to open in 2019, the future doesn't look very bright for the once beloved attraction.
This is Epcot Center. Epcot Center at Walt Disney World in Florida.
Since the closing of the Rocket Rods, the former People Mover tracks that once were a glimpse into an optimistic world on the move were left abandoned above Tomorrowland. But if you happen to be in the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World, you can still experience the People Mover, albeit an updated version using linear induction motors instead of wheels. So that was the history of the Disneyland People Mover. I hope you guys enjoyed this video because there will be many more where this came from. Comment down below what attraction you'd like me to cover next, and if you like this video, please subscribe and share with all your Disney loving friends. I also made a Patreon for all you guys to help support me, and once we reach our first goal, I'll be doing a huge giveaway for all my patrons. See you guys next time.